Uh, like our
Okay, now we're recording. All right. So welcome everybody, and I would like to thank you all for being here. And I would like to especially thank our guest speaker today for this is the second event of the year of the Center for Community Research and Engagement. And we're very excited to have Robin Toma with us today. And I just want to introduce him. He's the executive director of the Los Angeles County Commission on Human Relations. He has been doing that job for over 2 decades, so is well versed in these issues. He's served as the president and member of the boards of directors of the International Association of Official Human Rights Agencies, as well as the California Association of Human Relations Organizations. He's been a senior fellow at the UCLA Luskin School of Public Health Affairs, Public Affairs for the last decade or so, and was appointed by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights to serve on the California State Advisory Committee for the last 9 years. He also helped create and serve on the LA Unified School District's Commission on Human Relations, Diversity, and Educational Equity, issues that we are dealing with here at SDSU and trying to promote. So we'd love insight on that as well. And he's testified at many places, including the UN in Geneva. Robin is the son of Americans of Japanese and Okinawan descent, and his mother and her family spent World War II imprisoned in the U.S. internment camps. He went to LA Public Schools and received a BA in, I'm proud to say, sociology from UC Santa Cruz, and a JD and master's in urban planning from UCLA. So we're very lucky to have him here today, and I'd like to turn it over to you, Robin. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jill, for that very kind introduction. Sorry, there's a lot there, but I guess it tells you how old I am and how much time I've spent on some of these bodies. I mean, one thing I think you didn't mention is that I spent several years as an ACLU staff attorney. And in that role, I spent a lot of time suing many entities, including the County of Los Angeles, my current employer. And, um, and, you know, part of it is because there were, you know, the many issues that we took up in terms of civil liberties and civil rights of disenfranchised communities or targeted or vulnerable communities. They were under the responsibility of the county, in particular the county sheriff at the time. You know, some of the cases that I brought then are very much the kinds of issues that I deal with, but from a different aspect now. For example, you know, suing part of a team that sued the LA Sheriff's Department for the use of police dogs and the way it was used as in a way that inflicted unnecessary harm and excessive use of force on individuals who were unarmed, who were fleeing from, you know, from police, but suffered severe wounds because of the, you know, the kind of damage that dog bites do. But also in terms of voting rights against the county for the way at that time they were drawing the lines for voting districts in a way that would purposefully divide up Latino communities and prevent them from being able to have enough numbers in any one district to elect someone of their choice. So, you know, those are things that, so for example, now one of our areas of strategic focus as the LA County Commission on Human Relations is on increasing fairness and equity in policing. And we produced a report with 34 recommendations to strengthen policing in LA County and increase its respect for human equity. We also have been working with young people in high school age, particularly around building human relations leadership development capacity. But the thing that I'm here to talk to you about today in particular is, you know, the way we deal with the intersection between immigration and hate crimes and hate activity, as well as the pandemic. So I don't know if I'm going to have a chance to be able to share my screen, if that's possible, Jill.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So,
It's ready now.
okay, so I'll go there in a second, but I just wanted to start out by saying, we're all obviously deeply affected by the pandemic, and at the same time, we know that immigrants in particular are affected not only by the pandemic, but by the kind of targeting that they've been subjected to by the previous administration, and in terms of the hate activity that goes on throughout the country. But we see that in LA County. Our commission in particular has been, which is part of this Workforce Development, Aging and Community Services Department of LA County. But that larger department, we always talk about how that we as a department are an unstoppable force that uplifts and protects our most vulnerable. And we strive to build thriving and vibrant communities that are free of prejudice and inequity. And I just want to say that sort of as a backdrop, I think of government as having the responsibility foremost to ensure that everyone's fundamental human rights are being protected. And that's why I'm here, because I believe that that's the work I've been doing, is to ensure that the county is doing that work. And in that realm, we have been addressing one of the most basic protections, which is to be free of being targeted for hate violence. And that is something that is a serious human rights violation. You may know that the United States is a party to 3 major human rights treaties. And we are not a party to many others that are considered standard human rights treaties that are accepted and that most of the countries in the world are a part of. But the ones that we are a part of include the covenant against to eliminate racial discrimination and all forms of discrimination and xenophobia. And unfortunately, when people have to worry about simply being able to go about their business and not being targeted because of the way they look, because of their race, because of their sexual orientation, their religion, their disabilities, their gender identity, the country they come from. That is the situation which unfortunately has been especially real now in the pandemic, where Asian Americans are being seen as somehow responsible for the pandemic, or for being responsible for spreading it. And so it's really, been a new dimension of this pandemic that has been hard for a lot of Asian Pacific Islander communities, on top of what everyone else is dealing with, which is just the concern about dealing with the pandemic and the spread of coronavirus. But immigrant communities are also targeted, and we have seen this in our hate crime data. We actually go about collecting the hate crime data from all the police departments in LA County, which actually are upwards of 46 different agencies. And each of them have their own data, and we ask that they submit it to us, and they've been doing that now for years. And when we look at that data, it tells us what's happening in the county, at least for those that report. And I do want to underline that there is a tremendous amount of underreporting. But we know that, for example, regularly the 4 most targeted groups in any given year are going to be the African American community, the Latino community, the Jewish community, and the LGBT community. And because, unfortunately, we've been doing this for so long, we also know that probably any group that you identify with, whether it's your religion or your nationality or your gender or the country you come from or your ancestors come from, all of those groups have been targeted for hate crime in LA County. We're, of course, one of the largest counties we are the largest, most populous county in the country. And if we were a state, we'd be larger than 42 states in the nation. population-wise. So we have incredible diversity, and for the most part, there's an incredible degree of positive interaction, and not just positive, but including marriages and there's a huge growing population of inter-ethnic, interracial people within the county and within the nation. But there is this dimension of hate crime, which is severely underreported. So we've been reporting and seeing that over the past 6 years, consecutively, there have been an increase in hate crimes in our county. And we've reached the highest point since 2009. And so in seeing that, we realized we have to do something different, because the targeting of immigrants reached its second highest level in 2019 of attacks that are coupled with anti-immigrant remarks. We saw a jump in anti-Asian hate crime pre-pandemic. So it's clear that the hostility towards Asians isn't only fueled by the pandemic, but it was already pre-existing this the coronavirus declaration and the spread throughout the nations of the world. So we worked with the Board of Supervisors of LA County, and we decided to do something very different than had been done in the past. We realized that we needed to change the way that we deal with hate. Number one, people don't report it to law enforcement. The Justice Department estimates that there's at least twice as many hate crimes that actually get reported to the FBI each year. And in many cases, when we have looked at it with partner institutions, we've seen that it's way more. We're talking about 10, 20, 30, 40 times more hate crimes than actually get reported to law enforcement, depending on the targeted group. So that's one part where it is extraordinarily understated. But then you look at the dimension of those acts of hate, many of which you've seen or heard about in social media, like the case of Hong Lee, who was at a restaurant and was asked by a man in line whether she wanted to have lunch with him, and she replied that she was married. And he proceeded to go off on her with a flurry of anti-female, anti-Asian epithets, and just unleashing a torrent of angry comments, and that just kept her cornered in one part of the restaurant. And it was the kind of experience that she was so afraid. She called her husband, she called the police. The police showed up eventually, and they took a report, and they said to her, this happens all the time, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's not a hate crime. And he did offer to walk, or she asked him to walk her to her car. But that's the experience of most people who experience hate crime and report, or not hate crime, but hate incidents and report it. There's a vast amount of experiences that I'm sure many of you have heard when somebody says something to you like, you effing blah, 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 go back to where you came from, or simply use an epithet that relates to your race or gender or sexual orientation. There is nothing that is organized in our society to track that. It's been left to people to have to commiserate with their friends or family, or just to simply take it. And that normalization of hate has been the norm. It is the norm in our country. Only, a few law enforcement agencies will take down reports when you call them and they tell you that it's not a hate crime. And so we're talking about thousands of incidents of this type that go unreported, that are unknown to the larger population, unknown to government. And so we realize that what we're getting from the police departments that report hate crimes to us is literally just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the hate activity that goes on. And so we decided we had to do something about it that's different. And I'm going to show you what we came up with. Okay, so I don't know. Somebody just muted me, but unknown muted. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this, the slide, which is LA versus hate. Jill, is this visible to you?
A black screen came up, but not try again.
It says to me, it says I am screen sharing, and I would
I can
stop.
see it on my end.
Yeah, I can see it as well.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
you
see it
can all
well.
see it. Great.
Yeah, Robin,
I
it's all
cannot.
good.
Don't know why.
I'm
Oh,
sorry, Jill.
no,
Oh.
I can see it. I'm sorry. I have two monitors. Yes, great. Great job.
Okay, good. So this is the way we have branded the campaign and the initiative. At least the overall name of it is LA versus hate. And so the purpose here, though, isn't like so many anti-hate campaigns where we're just simply messaging and trying to engage, the fact that we as a community, and it's a vast majority of us, are against hate activity. And that we're clear, but it's not necessarily what you know if you've been targeted for hate. You may feel like when you've been yelled at and nobody stands up for you, that you're on your own. But this is part of it. But that's not what makes it different. And let me see if I can advance this. It doesn't seem to be responding to my, okay, here we go. So of course, as I mentioned, we're experiencing a period of anti-Asian hate, anti-Asian American and Pacific Islander hate. Most recently, what's happened in Atlanta has, I think, jarred the community. But even before that, there had been a number of incidents where particularly elderly Asian folks were just simply knocked down or attacked out of nowhere. And not only, in New York and Northern California, but we are seeing it in LA County as well. And we're sure it's happening in different places. But even beyond that, there were institutions that were targeted. A major Buddhist temple in Little Tokyo, Los Angeles was vandalized. And that was actually one of three. There was another temple, and the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles was also vandalized. But we also there was a recent demonstration in a part of LA called Diamond Bar, LA County, and a place that normally doesn't have demonstrations. But when somebody called for it, there were hundreds of people that turned out. But then there was a man who drove by in his car and drove into the crosswalk where they were, yelling anti-Asian epithets at them. Unfortunately, this is what we're hearing about around the county. So that is a major concern, and the Board of Supervisors has passed motions that would increase the resources for this work, as well as tie it into our county's anti-racism, diversity, and equity initiative. This is a case, so one of the things we did, I'm going to go ahead, is we set up a program that really has three aspects. And as I said, the one that is most common is to just message people that there is this, that we are standing together as an LA County community against hate. But another really important part of this was, we wanted people to understand they needed to report hate. And as I said, it's not been something that would make sense for most people because they've never done it in the past. There's been no one to report it to. If you report it to the police, they tell you they're not going to handle it. But we needed to let them know that if they did, something would happen. That not only would they get a free offer of help, and that's where you see the middle column, we set up a place where it would be easy for them to call 211 at any time of the day, and they would be received in terms of getting their report taken in, and they would be offered assistance for whatever it is they experienced. It's multilingual, it's confidential. They can do it via the website as well. And we have picked up hundreds of acts of hate that had previously were unknown to us, and that probably would not have been reported anywhere. And so with that information, we feed that data into a database, and it helps us understand what's happening where in a whole new way that we didn't know about. And the third part, the third column, is that we're linking that to a rapid response network. We want to build the local community's capacity to respond. And LA County is so vast. We have partnered with over a dozen community-based organizations that are linked to many of the targeted communities, whether they be connected to the Latino communities, to the LGBT community, to the Asian community, to distant parts of the county, such as Antelope Valley, to bullying on school campuses. So this variety of community-based organizations who are closely connected to the targeted communities are partners in responding to the hate, and to not only helping the individual, but most importantly to helping the community and to address the source of it. So if it's a school that is not taking bullying and hate incidents seriously, then we engage with that school leadership. If it's a business that has basically, as in the case that I mentioned, hasn't trained their staff to know how to help people who are being targeted, they're going to get trained. If people simply need counseling because of the trauma that they've suffered, they can be supported with trauma support and mental health counseling. And we partnered with school districts in LA County to do that work as well. So this is the, let me back up and just share this one other case. So this is during the pandemic last year. It's an example of how the pandemic has affected the issue of hate in our immigrant communities. Here was someone waiting in line at a local senior center to get emergency food. And a white man and woman began to curse at her, telling her to go back to her country and how immigrants expected everything for free. And when the man walked up to her and began to take, she recognized that she was in danger. She wanted to protect herself with her cell phone. He punched her in the face and chest and knocked the cell phone out of her hand and grabbed a rock and pointed it at her, threatening to kill her, effing B word. And she ran, no one in the line helped her. She ran to the senior center, but the door wouldn't open. So this situation was horrible on a number of different fronts. One is that, first of all, she's just simply trying to get emergency food, which is so critically important, particularly during the pandemic when so many people have lost their jobs and have lost access to their basic services and needs. But second of all, it's sending this message that people who are seeking that can't even do that under the pandemic because people are going to target them for hate. This has been, a situation where we had to figure out how to help her she would refuse to go back to the center. So we had to figure out a way to get food delivered to her home and connect her to one of the programs that did that. But I think this is happening based on our data on a broader scale. And I wanted to show you, this is the way in which we have, using the limited resources we had to do media and public education and outreach, is we've partnered with a firm that specializes in creating digital content, digital posters and GIFs that can be downloaded. And so it allows the LA versus Hate campaign to be customized to different geographic communities. There are 88 cities in LA County. So you may identify with your city more than LA County or LA even. You may connect to your sports team or to your cultural community. And here's some of the particularly the anti-Asian or those that are dealing with anti-Asian hate. And you can see the one for 211. Which is in multiple Asian languages. And so far, we've had millions of downloads of these from the LA-versus-hate.org website. And we've also done some limited amount of physical advertising You can see, if you know about the Grove and the Americana on Brand, two very popular shopping centers, we had digital billboards there, as well as what's called a yarn bomb that was at a public school in LA. This just gives you a sense of the kinds of hate we're seeing in LA County, hate activity. And you can see that a huge number is the use of derogatory names. But we actually have a significant number of threats of violence, about 1 out of every 5 of the reports are that. We've had more than 1 out of 5 are physical assault and battery. We have discriminatory treatment in a similar rate, but we also have things like sexual assault and even attempted murder and burglary and robbery. So clearly those are hate crimes, but it just tells you that, you know, this creates an avenue for people to report hate crime that isn't getting reported to law enforcement. I talked about some of the things that we offer because this is so critically important. If people don't feel like there's any reason to report, like they're going to report and nothing's going to happen it's going to help them or their community, they're not going to be reporting, and they're not going to encourage others to report. And so it's really important that we offer assistance to every single person who calls, regardless of whether or not it's a hate crime or incident. But we have seen the value in helping people with remedies they didn't even know they had. You can actually file a lawsuit or even a claim that's before a lawsuit against a business or a person for violating your civil rights under California law. And there are ample protections and provisions to actually provide you fees for attorneys to do that. We even have ways of connecting victims with Children and Family Services so they can address the fact that families may be using their minors to harass neighbors, which unfortunately we have seen in LA County. And as a result, we do not only work directly with the businesses involved, but we actually, or school districts, but we actually work with city governments to help them create solutions to support the communities that are being targeted for hate, and to create a human relations agency, you know, on the longer term for community engagement and to get ahead of the issues. There was a city in LA County where a church had set up that was spewing awful homophobic and misogynist rhetoric. And we worked with the grassroots activists that organized against them. And working with them and city government, we're working with the city council and the city manager to really undertake some meaningful changes so that the community feels supported, particularly the LGBT community, but to create a way for all their vulnerable communities to feel that the city is backing them, and to create avenues of community feedback and counsel so that they can help the city to get ahead of these acts of hate and sources of hate. This is the last slide I'm going to show you before my end slide, which is just to give you a sense of the diversity of our rapid response network. And they're so important because it's really through them that we're able to not just address the individual act of hate to the individual, but to bringing about change on a policy and a systemic level, whether it's through addressing business practices or school districts or individual schools, or to work on you know, city government. So they are a critical group that we are in a constant mode of expanding and providing more resources so they can do their work with us more effectively. And these are some of the people that you can reach out for more information if you want to help. And the wonderful thing if you're working online is that you can help no matter where you are. You can assist somebody who needs help, even from San Diego if they're in LA County. So if you feel the desire to do that, we're really happy to have anyone who can help these folks who are really in need of assistance to help get their claim before the right body, or to help to write a letter to their local school principal, or to address their city council representative. So I'm going to end it there and open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Robin. That was really informative. So we want to open it up to Oceana has raised her hand. So if you guys raise your hand, I can see those, and then we'll get started with question and answers. So Oceana, go ahead.
Hi. We are seeing a lot of stories on the news and such about incidents happening possibly regarding people who are trying to hate crimes or incidents. But I was wondering why law enforcement or government are so reluctant to label them as hate crimes.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Can I just jump in there? Maybe you can clarify. I know you've used different terms: hate crimes, acts of hate, hate speech. Maybe you can clarify for us,
Yes.
what is considered a crime. Having worked at the ACLU, what
Yes.
is the status of hate speech?
Right.
And how you're kind of redefining by using this other term. And then I also see Heather and Erica's hands. We'll move on to them when we're done with this question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jill. So hate crimes are clearly stated under the California laws and under the Penal Code. And in order for there to be a hate crime, you have to have first a crime that's already, under the Penal Code. And then you have to show that it's substantially motivated, not solely motivated, but substantially motivated by prejudice or animosity towards somebody because of their protected characteristic. And those protected characteristics are specified as race, ethnicity, national origin, gender, religion, sexual orientation, and disability. There has been efforts to expand it to other things, but at this point, that is the list under California law. Federal law is it also has a hate crimes provision, but it tends to be more limited as to what situations it applies to. Because by and large, it's the state laws throughout the country that govern, crimes. So when I say hate crimes, that's what I'm referring to. When I say hate incidents, those are acts of hate that do not involve a crime. When I say hate acts, I'm talking about both hate crimes and hate incidents put together. So your question is, why are they so reluctant? So, police departments, I will tell you that I spent a lot of time training police departments just to accept that hate crime was something they needed to pay attention to for a period of time. But then in the past, really it's been a couple of decades where they've accepted it. It's part of their standardized training. So that's not an issue anymore. But it is true that for many detectives and police departments, they realize that to prove a case of hate, they've said to us, they have to go more beyond just simply proving that this person hit another person, for example. They have to prove that the reason why they did it, that their motivation, their thinking was because of this person's race or sexual orientation. And it requires another level of investigation and proof that is often hard to meet. And so what happens a lot of times is that they are unable to prove that because they don't have adequate proof. And part of it is because, as Jill was referencing, there are protections in our Constitution, both in the federal and state constitution, for free speech. And so one of the things that is important in this country that's different than other countries, such as Germany, is that you can have very clear prejudices, and you can talk about believing one race is superior to another, for example, and you cannot be prosecuted because of your First Amendment rights. However, if that is your motivation for a criminal act, then you're outside of the protections of the First Amendment. But that is why, that's why sometimes there is that reluctance to prosecute, but more often than not, it's because police departments feel like there is not enough proof. It's not clear enough that that's the reason why. And so they're, they've got them already on a murder, or they've got them already on, a given crime. And, they're not going to expend the additional resources to try to prove necessarily it's a hate crime, or they feel like that's something that is burdensome to them. They won't say that, but that's oftentimes what they're really experiencing. What we ask them to do is at least, you have to just be clear that, and not exclude it as being a hate crime, particularly when the circumstances, such as what happened in Atlanta, seem to point to there being some racial motivation, because after all, who was targeted, who was killed? 6 of the 8 victims were Asian women. So coincidence, it's so that you have to be, we ask them, you have to say it's a possible hate crime you're investigating, unless you're clear, unless you have definitive proof it is not. You need to keep that open where the circumstances call for it. And therefore, most of the more advanced police departments recognize that and are careful to say we're investigating it as a possible hate crime. So hopefully, does that help to answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Robin. So I have Heather, and then after Heather, there's Erica and Jacob. So Heather, why don't you go ahead? Heather Azevedo.
Thank you very much. First off, Oceana, thank you for opening that up, because that's exactly what I was going to ask. But I wanted to follow up with Mr. Tobin. What is the actual, what are the current conviction rates, if there are any, for hate crimes?
So it may not surprise you, given what I just said, that
Right.
The rates of prosecution and conviction are very low. What often happens, and I'm talking about, and I'll give you an example. In our most recent report, the number of prosecutions out of 524 hate crimes that were reported in this given year, the same year, there were 68 hate crime cases referred to the district attorney, and that's because they were felonies or misdemeanors in places outside of LA County or places where they have city attorneys. And then you had another 47 cases referred to the LA City Attorney's Office. So really, we're talking about, 68 plus 22. We're talking about less than a fifth, right, of the cases that were reported that ended up being prosecuted. But now, let me be clear that it's not exactly a match, because we get the reports in a given year, but then the speed at which they actually move towards referral and prosecution could take them to another year. So it's not the same set. But just by and large, there are very few. I mean, there's only a fraction of the total that are reported that actually end up being prosecuted. It doesn't mean that people aren't prosecuted for other things, and oftentimes they use the hate crime charge as a bargaining chip, so that they'll basically say, plead guilty to the assault and battery, and we'll drop the hate crime charge. And so they know that's the harder thing to prove. But that is the reality of prosecution of hate crimes. So for us, we recognize that is actually the solution to hate crimes. We cannot rely upon prosecution and incarceration, and we don't want to rely upon that anyways, because it actually doesn't oftentimes reduce hate crime. It sometimes can even worsen it, because you connect people with prison gangs and jail gangs that end up sending them out to the street with even perhaps even with a clear racial agenda. So we believe that there's a whole lot of alternative approaches that need to be supported, and we're building that out, that are not involving incarceration, but rather education, community service, and really just recognizing that many people who act out are either ignorant and or disconnected from others and any community at all.
Thank you. Erica?
Hi. So you kind of answered my question with the other girls, but I guess one of my questions for me would be, I know that you mentioned that, it's really hard to just make people aware and act on it or help someone else. But also, what have you found in your research or throughout the years that has really been the most effective other than what you're doing now? I feel like there's so much information on the internet now. There's a lot of videos going around all of the time, and everyone's always on, kind of like more alert, especially with the pandemic and people have had time to sit and think with themselves. Like, is there anything that, I don't know, that's become like maybe more of a revelation through the pandemic that wasn't necessarily there before?
Um, well, I will say this, in terms of the things that people can do, it goes beyond what I said, because obviously we want people to be what we call upstanders, not bystanders to hate. So if you were to see, what you heard earlier, that this woman who was, this Latina woman who was attacked at the senior center, that nobody in line did anything. Partly that's because people are afraid and they haven't thought through what they should do in that situation. So we really believe that people can be prepared. For example, when I see something happening, I will do something to try to get them to stop the attack. I will tell them, hey, the police are coming. Somebody called the police and the police are coming. Something to get them to stop what they're doing and to at least, stop the attack that's happening to one person from the other. The other thing that people do is they'll sometimes confront. I'm sure you've seen videos where people have confronted, usually not when physical violence is happening, but when people say very racist, hostile things to others. They'll stand up for the person and they'll say, hey, that is not cool. And, you should not be saying those things. And in one case recently, I heard them telling the son of the man who was saying it that you should be ashamed of your father for treating this man this way. So that has happened a lot, where people, stand up for others. And that's really an important thing to do, to just simply watch, when people are being verbally attacked. It just makes the person who's verbally attacked feel very alone and makes them feel like perhaps everyone else agrees, or at least doesn't care enough to say something. Oftentimes people come to them afterward and say, I'm really sorry that happened to you. And that's self-comfort too. But there are particular trainings that we're doing to help people be prepared to be upstanders. And now, of course, we urge people to report, because you can get so many more resources if you call 211, if you go to laversushate.org and report it.
Okay, because for me, like, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
No,
for
go
me,
ahead.
like, this really does remind me. I don't know if you guys seen that show, like, What Would You Do? And it doesn't just have to do with race, but it does remind me how people, like, really, most people really don't say anything because they're so in shock, or I feel like they don't know what the right action is. But I think that, teaching people how to speak up, I think even like in school is just, I think we're all kind of taught like to just listen and abide by something, but sometimes like stepping out of that box and speaking up is something that I think should be taught more.
Definitely, definitely. And What Would You Do is a wonderful example of how oftentimes people will just sit there watching something and won't take action until somebody else does. I've heard the phrase recently, courage is contagious. I have seen that happen, where people have been afraid to say anything to an outrageous policy until somebody finally has the courage to say it, and then everyone else starts to join in. But there needs to be that first person who's going to say something. But we want people to do it in a responsible way, and we don't want people to do it in a way that's going to engender more violence. And so that's really an important warning as well. There's been a lot of angry folks about what's been happening. And sometimes people want to take it into their own hands. And we don't recommend that. And not in terms of, physically engaging. It is great to learn self-defense. But really what we need to do is change the societal conditions so that people aren't believing they can behave in this way and that it's okay.
Thank you.
I just want to point out that Professor Donaday put in the chat link to the AFSC, which is, I assume, the American Friends Service Committee, has a page on bystander interventions, so people can check that out in the chat. Jacob is next. Do you want to go ahead, Jacob?
Yeah. Hi, thank you. I was just wondering, back to those who are actually convicted of hate crimes, if the motive is labeled to be something, in race or sex, is there additional punishment for whatever they're charged for, say like battery or assaults, if it's then found that the motive is based in some like a hate crime, what is the additional punishment? Is it more jail time or is it subjective to each case?
So the statute provides for when a hate crime is someone convicted of a hate crime, that there is additional years or time to be put on the sentence, if that is the decision of the judge. That usually is what comes along with the hate element of a crime. But it isn't, as I've said, that is often the way that many of the legislators want to respond to a rise in hate crime. And in our experience, that has not been an effective deterrent, and can even lead to really fueling and connecting people to racialized crime and violence and activities, by being put in jails and prisons in our state. So, and there's no evidence that that actually reduces their likelihood of committing hate crime in the future. So yeah, that is the there is some consequence, right, to it being a hate crime versus a non-crime, and it is additional time, but not what we're thinking is the solution for reducing or ending hate crime.
Got it. So there's no like institution that they'd be sent to for like schooling or redirection if they are. Does that make sense?
There are some programs, not enough of them. For example, one is that some low-level hate crime offenders will be sent to or given the option to go to the Museum of Tolerance, or maybe that's a condition of their probation, or this agreement, in lieu of prosecution. And so they'll go to the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles. If you haven't been there, it's a wonderful place, which helps to really, give people a sense of the history of hate and how it's resulted in horrific, consequences. The Holocaust being, one of the major examples, but there being a lot of hate that happens on a lower level that can easily be turned into full-on policies by governments and by entire communities against other communities. So yeah, there are some, but not enough, and there's really inadequate funding and development of that area, but something that I think we're starting to see a change in.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Declan.
Thank you. You said earlier, Mr. Toma, that I think you said the FBI was able to say that for every hate crime reported, there's maybe an additional one that's not reported, meaning like there's like twice as many that are not reported. How are they able to actually, I don't know if accurately is the right terminology, but how are they actually able to say that without knowing, because simply no one's reporting that stuff? How are they actually able to give a good number?
Right, good question. So they actually engage in a what's called a crime victimization survey every year, and they will literally phone thousands of people around the country. And based on that, they're asking people directly, have you experienced crime? Have you experienced a hate crime? And they're getting that information. And then they're comparing to see whether that ever was reported to the FBI through the report to law enforcement, and then from law enforcement to the FBI. And that's how they come up with the underreporting data. So it's done, very specifically and based on speaking to the actual hate crime victims, and then determining that, what they're talking about is a hate crime, and then seeing whether it was ever reported ultimately to them, which is something that, it's been happening now. The reporting to the FBI from law enforcement has been happening for decades now, and as well as reporting to the state attorney general, that's mandatory in the state of California. And then the state attorney general reports to the FBI. But yeah, so it is based on actual, cases of hate crimes that never end up reaching them. And then they look at the difference. And sometimes it's because there are entire states, there are a few states that don't even have laws against hate crimes. So of course they're not reporting any hate crimes, but they're the exception. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Are there other questions? Mary? Oh, also, I'd like to just point your attention to that Arturo in the chat put an app to an ACLU, or a link to an ACLU app that helps people upload videos to report incidents of hate.
I think that
Mary-
one is meant to specifically for police misconduct, but maybe they broadened.
Yes, no, it actually, now that I'm reading it, it says police, reforming the police. Yeah, okay. So that's different. But thank you. That's a good thing to have anyways. Thank you, Arturo. Okay, Mary.
I just wondered if there has been any effort to incorporate the education piece of this, maybe on a grade specific level, into the current bullying curriculum in the schools.
So there hasn't been done on a systemic level. There have been efforts at social emotional learning programs like PBIS, positive behavior, something supports, I forget what it stands for, that is evidence-based and adopted in many schools. Right now, there's of course a push for ethnic studies to be incorporated. And, you know, I think there is a lot of what is done and said which relates to ignorance about communities, or lack of knowledge about the history of communities. And there is, you know, we actually have worked in schools where we have provided a curriculum for an elective class for youth leaders around human relations. And you know, when we've done that and we've had school clubs developed around that, it's been very successful, because what we've learned is that particularly middle school and high school, they listen much more to their peers than to administrators and teachers. And so when we have them leading the charge, it's been so much more effective in creating safer spaces and safer campuses. So that's one of our learnings that we always impart and try to convince school officials to not be the ones declaring policies, but rather working with students and empowering them to talk to other students about it. That is a much more effective way of changing campus culture.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Allie?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. You mentioned that it's within our right to file a lawsuit against any business that doesn't respect one's civil rights. But I'm wondering, and I've been wondering, how successful these lawsuits actually are. And if it's not more like detrimental towards the individual going through it, because businesses can be so large and powerful that it may not actually gain traction or go anywhere.
Yeah, good question. So there's no question that, you know, it can be a power imbalance, but that's why we are assisting. So when we have helped people, there was actually a case in which day laborers were being denied service in a town, in a community in LA County, where the city had decided they didn't want Mexicans in their town looking for work. And they referred to Mexicans being all the Latinos, even though many weren't Mexican, of Mexican ancestry. And Jack in the Box joined in that and basically refused to serve anyone who looked like a day laborer, which is basically they were Latino men. They refused to serve them coffee because they said, we don't serve Mexicans. Well, using that statute, we sued, and Jack in the Box paid several $1,000s to every individual. Now, obviously, not everyone can get the ACLU to support it, but what we've seen just in our work in LA County under LA versus Hate is that when we have brought that case to, it just filed it, a claim, not a lawsuit, just a claim that's before a lawsuit, to the State Department of Fair Employment and Housing, which is responsible for enforcing civil rights laws in the state of California. The first thing they do is once they decide that this is a viable claim, they then set up a mediation with the business that you're complaining about. And that mediation brings them to the table. And in our case, we are in the process of getting an agreement where the business is agreeing that in exchange for certain, you know, like to don't put our name negatively in your social media. And in turn, we'll, you know, train our staff. We're going to put, you know, a poster up. We're going to take actions which we speak to your concerns about not really being helped in a timely way by our staff when this was happening to you. So that's an example of, even on a very basic level, where businesses will realize that there's a real, that they're hurting if the word's out that they have allowed harassment and bullying and just threats to happen against people based on their race or their gender, right, in their work, in their business. So that's an example of where this can result in meaningful change. And I think that's really, for us, a pathway to getting businesses who see this happening, recognizing that they can take steps so this doesn't happen. They can post signs and make it clear to patrons, we don't allow, racist, sexist, homophobic, bigoted harassment in our business. And if we see that, we're going to ask you, we have the right to ask you to leave, and then to make sure their employees, when they see it happening, do something about it. And I think that really sends a clear message to would-be racists who want to. Recently, this case came up, which stunned me, where a woman told another woman in a bakery, "You have to wear a mask. That's our policy. Can you please put on a mask?" And the woman proceeded to throw pastries and a bottle of creamer at the woman, yelling anti-Asian epithets. So, that's an example of, kind of what can happen in a, obviously, it wasn't the fault of the business, it's the fault of this customer. But because of our and others advocating for this business on this case, the sheriffs did move and detained the woman, arrested her, booked her, and then released her, because she was, I think, 80 something years old, the woman who did this attack. But just because you're elderly doesn't mean you get to do these things.
We have a couple people in the chat that are asking if what you're doing has been replicated in other California counties, and a specific question, if you know about San Diego County, what kind of I know they have a human rights commission, I think it's called here.
Yeah, it's just the county recently reestablished. They had one many years ago,
Yeah.
And it was dismantled, and then they have reestablished it recently, which is great. And the city has had one for a while. But no, I have not heard of any. There are agencies like the Orange County Human Relations that are, their partner human relations agencies, and they have tried to put out a message called No Hate campaign, which is KNOW hate, and NO being part of it, with the message being that people need to understand where hate is coming from. But it is, what's different about ours is that it's not just a messaging campaign, tone setting campaign, but having this back end where you're actually having a reporting system, data gathering system, and a response system. I have not heard of that, although there are definitely, we've talked with New York City, who's very interested, New York City County, Florida, other jurisdictions have expressed interest, and I don't know of any that have gotten as far as we have. But we had a national gathering with the Southern Poverty Law Center, which you may know is a leading nonprofit, national nonprofit that has been working against the Klan and other extremist groups. And that was about a year or so ago. And there were folks from all over the country, but none had gone to where we had, which is to create a system of response and reporting. So we're definitely in new territory and building it as we move along. But it's been really gratifying so far to see the number of reports of hate that we otherwise wouldn't know about, and to see the change that we're seeing in schools and in businesses and other places where we've been able to advocate for victims of hate.
That's great. We have one more question, Jose. Do you have a question, Jose Bruno?
Yes, I just wanted to ask.
I'm sorry, Jose, we're having trouble hearing you.
To convert into a hate crime.
Are you getting that?
No. I heard hate crime at the end, but that's not an.
Is it possible for
Oh, thank you.
microaggressions to grow the crime?
I heard, is it possible? And then the rest got garbled.
You want to put it in the chat, Jose? Sorry about that. I think
That's
your
okay.
connections.
We all have learned to adjust to
Yes.
the unpredictability of our internet.
Possible to microaggressions to convert them into hate crimes. So I guess.
So there's no question that microaggressions, reflect some tension and animosity towards somebody, perhaps, or because of race, because of sexual orientation, because of gender, because of immigration status. So yeah, it's absolutely possible. I think that's the idea is to us to address this in a proactive way, in a way that deters these things from happening, and that's by making it clear that this is not, acceptable behavior in our schools, in our businesses, in our, parks, in our workplaces. But when it happens, and it may not be actionable yet, but it reflects something that is happening, that's important to also address. And I think, you folks have heard how folks are not comfortable with talking about race and other issues. Oftentimes, they're not sure how to handle those, and they're afraid of misspeaking. We're also about trying to facilitate those conversations and help people have those conversations in a safe space and be able to talk them through in an environment where, you have a good chance at having a breakthrough, or at least, people gaining a greater understanding of each other's perspectives. And I think microaggressions are a sign that something is amiss, and it's good to take that as a sign to start to do something about it and not wait till it's gotten to the point of an act of hate.
Well, thank you so much, Robin. I want to make a couple of announcements and then wrap up, unless there's any burning questions people have. I really appreciated the whole discussion, and especially the upstander suggestions and remedies that you all are working on in workplaces as well as for individuals. I did want to say that if Robin's amenable to it, we can post his PowerPoint. There were some questions in the chat on that. We can post that at the CCRE website, and maybe Deanna, you can once again put the link to that in the chat for people, so we'll get that up there, and hopefully also the recording. There may be some glitch about that, but we're going to try to get the recording up there, according to the administrator who posts things. But again, we really appreciate getting this sense of what, a really progressive and active and interventionist city government can do to address these issues, rather than sitting back and, really being a model for other places. And it's great for us to get a sense of that as we work on things within our university and our city as well. So I really appreciate you coming, and maybe we can, everybody can unmute themselves if they would like to say goodbye or thank you or whatever. You're welcome to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful
Thank
presentation.
you.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
By the way, what college were you in? Santa Cruz.
Merrill and
Fellow
Oaks. Slug
there, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
Merrill and Oaks. Yeah.
I was in Oaks.
Were you? All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love my time there.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think our graduate class will stay on, but thank you to everybody who came and participated. And thank you, Robin, so much for your time and all the work that you're doing. We really
Thank you,
appreciate
Dr. Pinchate. Appreciate it.
it.
Bye.
All right. I'm going to stop recording. Oh, stop cloud recording. Yes.